She crawled for help after her village burned. The Apache warrior found her in the ashes. Arizona Territory, late 19th century, near the edge of Apache lands. The wind carried the scent of pine smoke and scorched canvas as midnight folded over the quiet valley. For years, the small settlement of Willow Creek had rested peacefully, white homesteaders and a few Apache families coexisting with wary tolerance, anchored by the strength of the land and a silence earned through hardship. That silence shattered in a single night. Emily Ross had been asleep in her small cabin, built with her own hands, beside the one where her grandmother lived, when the first shot rang out like a thunderclap. Then came screams, then the unmistakable roar of fire. She barely made it to the door before the blast knocked her off her feet. Flames danced on rooftops like devils freed from hell. Figures moved in the dark, shadowed men with torches and rifles, their coats marked with badges not from any law Emily had ever known. They were not raiders, not outlaws. They were worse, organized, paid, soldiers without allegiance, hired to make land available. Emily, her grandmother had screamed, just once, before being dragged from the porch, kicking and striking. That was the last she saw of her. Pain lanced through Emily's leg as a falling beam struck her thigh. She blacked out. When she woke, the stars had shifted. Her mouth was full of ash. The silence was complete. Only the crackle of dying flames and the occasional groan of collapsing timber filled the space where her village had once breathed. She tried to sit up but cried out. Her leg throbbed and bent strangely. She looked down and saw blood soaked through the cloth of her nightdress. Around her, the ground was littered with familiar faces twisted in death, neighbors, friends, a child still holding a burnt wooden horse. Tears blurred her vision. She crawled. She did not know where she was going at first. There was no logic, only instinct. She crawled toward the hills, toward the stories whispered by the older settlers. Stories of Apache warriors who watched from the cliffs and moved like ghosts. Dangerous, they said, unforgiving, but maybe, just maybe, more human than the men who had torched her home. Every movement sent pain through her leg and spine. Her palms blistered on the hot earth, her throat cracked with thirst. But she clutched the leather cord around her neck, a small stone pendant shaped like a crescent, given to her by an old Apache woman who once traded at the edge of the village. The woman had called her child of balance, though Emily never knew what it meant. She crawled past the remains of the well, where the fire had evaporated every drop. She crawled over broken tools, burned hay, half-eaten meals turned to ash. Each yard was a memory. Each breath was a cost. By the time she reached the low rise at the edge of the canyon, dawn had begun to stir the horizon. The sky bled orange through the smoke. Her strength gave out. Her hands trembled. Her lips moved, but no sound came. I'm not done, she thought. But the world spun. Then she collapsed, face down in soot, the stone pendant warm against her chest, eyes fluttering shut. From behind a rocky outcrop, a figure emerged. Tall, still, wrapped in the colors of sand and shadow. He said nothing. He watched her. His eyes, dark as obsidian, held no fear and no judgment, only recognition. The wind shifted, and the last ember from Willow Creek flickered and died. The warrior did not move, not yet. Southern Arizona, late afternoon, the land where desert meets the edge of Apache mountain territory. The sun hung low, bleeding gold and rust across the rugged hills. The man named Nantan crouched in the shade of a juniper tree, still as stone, watching the pale figure collapsed in the dust. Her clothes were scorched, her skin smeared with ash and blood, yet she gripped a leather cord tightly in her hand. A stone pendant, curved like a crescent moon, hung against her chest, half buried in soot. He recognized it. His jaw tightened. It was not meant for her, not for any white woman. That kind of token passed only between those who understood the old ways. Yet here she was, half dead, barely breathing, but holding on like a wolf with a bone. The fires from the distant settlement still left smoke trails in the sky, stinging the back of his throat. He had seen that smoke before, in another time, in another life. He took a slow breath and stepped forward. The crunch of gravel under his boot stirred the silence. She flinched, eyes flickering open, cracked lips parting. Water. Her voice was more a rasp than a sound. He didn't speak. He knelt beside her, poured a thin trickle from his canteen into her mouth. She coughed, then swallowed, eyes fluttering closed again. Her hand still gripped the pendant. "I'm not your enemy," he said softly, "but you've come where you should not." She did not respond. Her body trembled in his shadow. Nantan stood for a moment longer, torn. The rules were clear. His people did not harbor outsiders, especially not the ones whose kind had stolen land and spilled blood. But there was a weight in his chest that hadn't left since the day his brother died, at the hands of the same type of men who had burned this woman's village. Mercenaries. Paid violence. The same fire, in different uniforms. He could leave her. Let the desert take her. No one would question it. Instead, he bent down and slipped his arms beneath her shoulders and knees. She moaned faintly, her head lolling against his chest as he lifted her. She was light, bones and soot and heat, but the weight of the choice made his legs feel heavy. As he started toward the hidden canyon where he kept his shelter, he spoke more to the wind than to her. "If you survive the night," he murmured, "I'll take you somewhere fire won't follow." It was not a promise he gave easily, but it came from the deepest part of him, the part that had not yet turned to stone. The stone shelter was tucked between red rocks and thornbush, nearly invisible unless one knew where to look. By the time the last rays of sun vanished beyond the ridgeline, Emily lay wrapped in a worn buffalo hide, her leg cleaned and bound. Nantan had worked in silence, methodical, avoiding her eyes even when she stirred. He had set no fire, only glowing coals, masked from the wind. Outside, coyotes howled, and the chill crept in. Inside, Emily opened her eyes to the faint glow from the embers. She didn't know where she was, only that her body hurt less and her thirst had quieted. Her fingers touched the stone pendant at her throat. She turned her head and saw him sitting near the cave's edge, back straight, knife across his lap. His silhouette cut a still figure against the moonlight outside. "You saved me," she whispered. He didn't move. "You held something sacred." She looked down at the pendant. "It was given to me by a woman who once traded wool for thread," she said. "It would help me remember balance." She spoke truth. Silence stretched between them. Emily stared at the cracked ceiling of stone above her, then at the night sky beyond the cave's mouth. Stars blinked in the vast blackness, and the moon rose pale and full. She had never felt more lost, and yet not entirely alone. "I don't know your name," she said. "Nantan." She whispered it once, letting it settle in the dark. Then, softly, "I'm Emily." Nantan didn't reply, but she saw the way his shoulders shifted, just slightly, as if the burden he carried had moved. Emily closed her eyes. The pain was still there. So was the fire behind her. But ahead, something had shifted. And for the first time since her village burned, she slept. Emily stirred awake to the low rhythm of hooves pressing into sand. Her body ached, her leg throbbed, but she was no longer burning. The world was heat and movement, and somewhere beside her rode a silence that felt like strength. She glanced sideways. Nantan walked alongside the horse, guiding the reins. His eyes swept the horizon, sharp under his brow, as if he could sense shifts in the wind itself. Behind them, strapped carefully to another animal, her grandmother lay wrapped in blankets, motionless but breathing. They had found her by chance, a fleeting shape slumped beneath a half-toppled shed as they left the edge of the destroyed village. Her skin was smoke-stained, but Nantan had carried her without a word. For 3 days, they moved through the desert. By day, the sky boiled. Winds kicked sand into their teeth, and the sun weighed down their bones. By night, cold crept into their clothes, and jackals howled in the distance. Nantan gave Emily his scarf to wrap over her face. He showed her where to dig near stones, where water gathered after rare rains, how to suck moisture from the roots of brittle bushes. When her mouth cracked, he offered his canteen without hesitation. One evening, as they rested behind a boulder streaked with ancient red ochre, she noticed the torn cloth near his side. Blood had soaked through. "You're hurt," she whispered. "It is shallow. Let me see." He hesitated but allowed her to unwrap the bandage. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from a kind of reverence. She cleaned the wound with cloth soaked from a cactus, and he didn't flinch once. "Why do you help me?" she asked quietly. His gaze didn't leave the distance. "Because once, my brother asked for help. No one came." She lowered her eyes. "My brother followed me into a trap," Nantan said after a pause. "I believed the men we worked with meant peace. He didn't. He was right. I came back alive. He didn't." Emily looked at the sky, now blooming with dusk. "My parents died from fever," she said. "It swept through the valley when I was 10. I don't remember their voices. My grandmother raised me. She never stopped believing we could belong somewhere." He turned toward her. She was right. The moment held between them, fragile as the wind shifting through the sand. But peace never stayed long in such places. On the morning of the 4th day, as they moved through a narrow stone pass, a sharp whistle broke the air. Nantan froze. His hand went to the knife at his belt. From the rocks above came shouting, then gunfire. Emily's horse spooked, and she tumbled hard into the dirt. Pain exploded through her side. She crawled behind a rock, heart pounding. "Stay down," Nantan barked, voice fierce. She saw him vanish into the cliffs, moving like smoke, drawing the fire toward himself. Gunshots cracked through the gorge. Dust rose. A scream echoed, then silence. Minutes passed. Then, a sound behind her. A rustle. She turned sharply. It was Nantan. His face was streaked with blood, shirt torn, but his eyes were alive. "I lost them in the sands," he said. "They followed me into a sink bed, buried themselves." She tried to stand. Her legs buckled. He caught her. As he cradled her in his arms, she saw past the warrior, into a man carrying scars deeper than wounds. Not just a protector, not just a guide, someone searching for something to hold on to. Her voice was weak, but steady. "I trust you." His arms tightened slightly, a response beyond words. That night, as she lay beside her grandmother beneath a tarp of woven reeds, Emily stared at the stars overhead. The desert whispered around them. She did not know where the path led, but she knew who she would walk it with, not because he had saved her life, but because, in a world of fire and betrayal, he had chosen to carry her, without asking why. The wind rose like a scream. By late afternoon, the sky had turned copper. The desert whispered warnings, and the fine dust in the air stung the skin. Nantan squinted at the horizon. "A storm is coming." Emily, shielding her eyes, asked, "How bad?" He looked to the sky. "Bad enough to bury tracks. Bad enough to kill." They reached the old relay station just as the first wall of sand crashed over the ridge like a wave. Half of the adobe structure had collapsed, but the remaining walls stood firm enough to shield from the wind. Inside, it was dim and musty. Rats had claimed corners, but Nantan moved quickly, securing the doors with broken beams. He laid out blankets on the cold floor. Emily wrapped her arms around her grandmother, who was shivering and pale. "We need heat," she murmured. Nantan built a fire in the hearth using dry scrub and kindling scavenged from the broken roof. He heated stones in the flames, wrapped them in cloth, and tucked them near the old woman's sides. He draped their last fur across the two women. Emily pressed her hand against her grandmother's chest. It rose slowly, then fell. "She keeps calling my name in her sleep," Emily whispered. Nantan knelt beside them. The fire's light flickered across his cheekbones. "She knows you're near," he said softly. Then, to Emily's surprise, he took the old woman's hand in his own, gnarled and cracked with dirt and wind. His thumb brushed gently over her knuckles, almost reverently. "She reminds me of mine," he said. "Kind eyes, voice like river wind." Outside, The storm roared. They huddled together as the wind pounded the walls, as sand spilled through cracks like time through an hourglass. But the wind was not the only sound. A second rhythm emerged, heavier, deliberate. Footsteps, metal scraping against stone. Emily froze. Someone's here. Nantan's eyes darkened. He doused the fire quickly, pressed his ear to the wall. Voices murmured on the other side. Men, laughing, swearing, oblivious to anyone else inside. Bounty hunters. They are hiding from the storm, too, Nantan whispered. But they'll search. Emily clutched her grandmother tighter. There is a tunnel, he said, pointing to a half-collapsed trap-door under a pile of crates. Old riders used it when this place sent signals. He cleared the debris silently, motioned for Emily to help. Together, they eased the trapdoor open. Cool air drifted up, laced with dust and memory. I'll hold them, Nantan said. No, Emily hissed. We go together. He shook his head. If they see you, they shoot. If I distract, you escape. Emily wanted to argue, but her grandmother stirred beside her, moaning. Emily, Nantan turned. In the near dark, he knelt again, gently brushing hair from the old woman's face. You are safe, he said, voice low and certain. She will carry you now. Then he turned, gun in hand, and vanished into the shadows of the station. Emily dragged her grandmother into the narrow tunnel. The passage sloped downward, damp and narrow, but it led away from guns and sand and fear. Behind them, a single shot rang out, then another. She pressed forward. Minutes passed like hours. When the exit came into view, a jagged crack of morning light, Emily squinted into it. Then, a shadow moved toward her. Nantan, she cried. He stumbled through the dust, a gash across his cheek, blood on his sleeve, but standing. They ran, he panted. They did not expect the storm to turn. They emerged from the earth, just as the last winds died. The world lay flattened beneath a sheet of gold. Sand drifted in calm dunes, and the sky was pale and vast. Emily rose to her feet, legs trembling, and took the final steps without help. Nantan watched her quietly, his breath still heavy. You walk like someone who owns the land now, he said. She smiled, not at his words, but at the way he looked at her, as if seeing more than the girl who had crawled through ashes. For the first time since fire had stolen her home, Emily stood under the open sky and knew she was still here. The village lay nestled beneath the shadow of red cliffs, huts built from clay and timber, smoke curling from their thatched roofs like soft signals to the sky. When Nantan rode in with Emily, and her grandmother slumped across the horse behind him, silence fell like a stone dropped in still water. Eyes turned, children stopped playing, elders squinted from shaded porches. Emily felt it, the weight of unfamiliar gazes, the sharpness of judgment behind every glance. She tried to sit tall, even as pain gnawed at her side, but she clutched the saddle tighter when a man in feathered braids stepped forward. His voice was deep and measured. She is not of us. She is hunted, Nantan replied, his voice firm. Her people burned, her blood spilled. I found her in the ashes. The man said nothing for a long while, then turned to the others. She stays the night, not more. That night, Emily tended to her grandmother by a fire outside one of the smaller huts. A woman left a bowl of warm water nearby but said nothing. Others walked past without acknowledgement. She should rest, Emily said softly, placing a damp cloth on her grandmother's brow. She is, Nantan replied in Apache, then repeated in English for her. He sat beside them, gently stirring herbs into a broth. He showed Emily how to crush the leaves with flat stones, how to check the old woman's breathing. By the second day, Emily had learned to knead maize into small cakes. Her hands were clumsy, but she laughed with the elder woman who showed her how to press the dough into perfect circles. The first time she got it right, the old woman touched her cheek and nodded once. It felt like a blessing. Children still avoided her. Men watched her with hard eyes, but she kept working, sweeping, mending, learning to speak simple phrases. She whispered them to Nantan at night by the fire. Water, Sunday, safe. One afternoon, while Emily carried water from the stream, a boy no older than 15 stood in her path. His arms crossed, face full of fire. "You are tro blanca," he said in a low sneer. "White ash, nothing." Emily froze. His words cut deep, not because she understood them fully, but because of the way others stopped to listen, how their silence gave the insult weight. Before she could speak, Nantan stepped forward. "She has survived more than fire," he said calmly in Apache. "She walks without fear. She cares for the old. She learns your tongue, not to steal, but to stay." The boy stared at him, then turned and walked away. No one else said anything. Later, as the stars came out, Emily sat beside Nantan outside the longhouse. The night was warm, and the drum of crickets filled the space between them. "You didn't have to say anything," she whispered. "I did," he replied, "or they would forget what honor looks like." The next morning, the tack-tack sound of a staff tapped against earth announced the arrival of the village elder. He approached slowly, eyes on Emily. She stood, back straight, heart pounding. "You stay," the elder said, voice heavy with years. "But not because of him." Emily nodded, confused. "You stay because you have not asked. You have only given." Then he added, "But to truly remain, you must show you belong." He turned and left. Emily glanced at Nantan. "I don't know what that means." He looked at her, smile faint but sure. "It means, keep doing what you're doing." The sun was low as Nantan and Emily crouched behind the ridge, watching the dusty outpost below. Crates were being moved, voices barked orders, horses snorted. And at the center, flanked by 2 armed men in long coats, stood Samuel Marlowe, his slick hat tilted back, sleeves rolled up. Marlowe laughed as he opened a wooden crate to reveal rifles, shiny, new, deadly. Emily's heart pounded. She recognized him immediately. The sharp jaw, the cruel mouth, but it was the scar on his wrist, a pale, curved mark beneath his cuff that burned itself into her memory. She had seen it in the firelight, the night her world ended. "He's the one," she whispered. Nantan nodded. "We wait for the signal." Their group, 4 Apache warriors and 2 settlers loyal to neither side but the land itself, had circled the ridge at dawn. The plan was simple: create a diversion, isolate Marlowe, and take him alive. Emily insisted on going in. "I know his face," she said. "Let me do this." Dressed in a dust-streaked poncho, her hair tied back, Emily approached the camp at sunset with a mule and a crate of herbs. "Delivery for Mr. Marlowe," she called out in a thick accent, playing the part of a southern trader. One of the guards looked her over. "We ain't expectin' no girl." "She's got paperwork," Emily replied, handing over a forged sheet. As the man squinted at it, a distant whistle echoed from the ridge. The signal. Suddenly, gunfire cracked from the far side. The guards turned. Emily didn't. She spun, drew the revolver hidden beneath the herbs, and fired once, striking the ground near Marlowe's feet. He shouted, reaching for his pistol, but before he could draw, Nantan burst from the shadows and tackled him to the dirt. A scuffle erupted. One of the guards raised his rifle at Nantan. Emily screamed. Bang! She had fired before she even realized it. The guard fell, her hands shook. The other men surrendered quickly. Marlowe tried to crawl, but Nantan's boot pressed to his back. "You remember her?" Nantan asked, his voice low. Marlowe spit dust, then looked up. His face paled when he saw Emily standing, gun still raised. "You," he growled. "You should have burned with the rest." Emily stepped forward, trembling, but her voice steady. "You torched our homes, took lives. For what? Money? Silver?" Marlowe sneered. "For land, for future, for progress." She looked at the scar on his wrist, then met his eyes. "I remember that scar. I saw it while my neighbors burned." Marlowe laughed once, bitterly. "You'll never prove anything." "You just did," Nantan said. "You confessed." They tied him, gathered the weapons, and left the outpost smoldering behind. That evening, Nantan and Emily stood on the same hilltop where her village once stood. The grass had started to grow back, soft green shoots poking through blackened soil. Emily reached down, letting her fingers touch the earth. "It doesn't smell like smoke anymore," she whispered. Nantan took her hand. The breeze brushed past them, warm and dry. "This ground remembers," he said, "but it forgives too." She leaned into him, eyes closed, for a long moment. Then, they turned together, walking back toward the people now waiting for them, not just to return, but to rebuild. The smoke from the fire curled into the dusk sky, fragrant with roasted corn and wild herbs. Children laughed as they chased each other between tents and new wooden frames, homes still being raised from ash and promise. This land, once scarred by flames and loss, now carried the pulse of a new community. Emily sat beneath a cottonwood tree, weaving at her loom. Her fingers moved with confidence, rhythm, and memory. The patterns she threaded were a blend, symbols from the Apache and motifs passed down from her grandmother's grandmother. Nearby, the older woman sat on a woven mat, telling children the story of the river that ran backward when the stars fell. Across the open yard, Nantan moved easily between groups of boys, showing them how to shape arrowheads and teaching them Apache words for hawk, wind, and hope. His laugh rang out often, deeper, freer than when Emily had first met him in the ash. That night was the first full moon since Marlowe's capture. The entire village, Apache and settlers alike, gathered for a shared feast, a ceremony of peace and beginning. Drums thudded softly, lanterns flickered from tree branches. Emily wore a hand-dyed shawl she had woven herself. As she approached the circle, Nantan stood waiting. In his hand, wrapped in a piece of tanned hide, was a small ceremonial knife. He unwrapped it carefully and held it out to her. The blade was simple, polished, smooth, but its handle was carved with the symbol of his family, two entwined hawks circling the sun. "In our way," he said gently, "this means, my life is bound to yours. You carry it with you, as I carry your breath with mine." Emily's lips parted, her voice caught. She took the knife slowly, cradling it like something alive. "I never needed a ring," she whispered. "Just this." As the crowd around them began to cheer, a man near the edge, a settler, older, grizzled, muttered loudly, "She's more Apache now than any white girl should be." The laughter quieted, eyes turned. Nantan's expression didn't harden. He stepped forward, voice even but clear. "She is my wife," he said, "not by blood, but by choice. She has lived our pain, shared our bread, stood beside me when fire came. If that makes her Apache, then I am proud she is." Silence. Then, the tlek-tlek of the elder woman's cane as she stood up slowly. "Well," said the grandmother, "that's the first time I've heard a man talk straight since my William died." Laughter broke out, louder than before. The man who had spoken looked away, abashed. Later, as the fire crackled and drums rose again, Emily leaned into Nantan's shoulder, watching the flames dance. "I didn't know if I'd ever feel this," she murmured. "What?" he asked. "Safe. Wanted. Home." He didn't answer with words. He just wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close as the people around them sang to the sky. And in that circle of light, Emily knew her journey had ended, not in escape, but in belonging. The grass rippled gently across the open prairie, painted gold under the soft light of early spring. A wooden house stood nestled near the edge of the pine forest, smoke curling lazily from its chimney. It was modest, hand-built with care, but it breathed of peace, of permanence. Emily knelt beside the small garden, planting early herbs as birds trilled above. Behind her, the laughter of a child rang out clear and bright. "Mama, look!" the little girl shouted, holding up a tiny piece of cloth. It was faded and frayed, the last remnant of the burned dress from that long-ago night. But her small fingers had clumsily stitched a red flower into it. Emily smiled, brushing dirt from her hands. "You're learning fast." The child beamed. "Papa says it's good luck if you stitch with your heart." From the edge of the woods, Nantan emerged, carrying freshly chopped firewood. He set it down by the house and walked over, crouching beside his daughter. "And what does your heart say today?" he asked softly. She looked up at both of them, eyes wide and steady. That this is home. Later that afternoon, Emily stood by the stream behind their house. In her hands, she held a small pouch. She opened it, revealing the ashes of the fabric, the last piece of her past she had kept. The dress that once burned with her village. She let the ashes fall into the water, watching as the current took them gently away, disappearing among the reeds. "I'm not afraid to remember anymore," she whispered. Nantan stepped beside her. He said nothing, just took her hand. She turned to him, voice quiet. "You didn't just save me, Nantan. You gave me a place to live, really live." He met her gaze, his eyes reflecting the soft glint of the stream. "And you taught me how to live, not just survive." From behind, the sound of feet in the grass. Their daughter ran toward them, her braid bouncing behind her, a drawing in hand, 3 figures holding hands under a pine tree, the sun rising above. "One day," she said, breathless with joy, "I'm going to tell this story too, but in my own voice." Emily knelt, embracing her, "And we'll listen, every word." As the sun began to dip behind the hills, the 3 of them sat together on the porch. The wind carried no smoke, only the scent of pine and fresh earth. Laughter, soft and steady, rose with the dusk. The camera would pull back here, over the house, over the meadow, the trees, the stream. The story did not end with running away. It ended with the choice to stay, to rebuild, and to love the land where ashes once lay. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through fire, ash, and healing. She crawled for help after her village burned. The Apache warrior found her in the ashes is more than just a love story. It's about survival, trust, and the power of choosing to stay when running feels easier. If this story moved you, hit that hype button to let us know you want more heartfelt tales like this. And don't forget to subscribe to the Wild West Love Stories channel, where every frontier has a heartbeat, and every legend begins with love. See you in the next ride across the West.